All right, good. So we're going to start tonight's special edition of the Motzi Shabbos Mileva Malka edition. I've got my Kahal Yereim pizza, not my Kahal Yereim mug instead. So special thank you to the pizza sponsors who are anonymous, or just everybody involved. Thank you to them. We are on Daf Chof Ches Amud Aleph, 16 lines down, and the Daf Yomi sponsors for the month are Duvi and Tehila Katcher B'Schus Refuah Shlema for Ephraim Ben Shifra. Thank you so much to them. And we are in Daf Chof Ches Amud Aleph, sort of a tricky, I would say Yevamos-ish next little piece here. So put on your thinking caps for about the next Amud or so, as we're going to go into family relationships just for a little bit. We're trying to figure out which relatives are the relatives that you cannot testify about, right? So what we've learned so far is that the pasuk tells us that fathers cannot die for their sons and sons cannot die for their fathers, and we said that means, just to redraw our diagram, that we had fathers plural, so therefore we had one father here and another father here, and we had sons plural, so we have a son here and we have a son here, and each of these fathers cannot testify about each of the sons, and each of the sons cannot testify about each of the fathers, which means that to this point, we know that sons can't testify about their fathers, sons can't testify about their uncles, uncles can't testify about their sons or their nephews. Okay? That's what we've gotten so far. Now, then we started to ask, that's fine about testifying about each other. What about, can they combine together to testify about a third party? And we said that the last thing that we had discussed was, no, ubanim, from the extra ubanim, the extra vav there, tells us that even sons can't go to testify against others as well. So therefore, now we know these witnesses not only can't testify to each other, but they can't combine together to form a testimony. So that's what we're up to. Ashkechan krove ha'av. Now, in this, what we're up to so far, we've had relatives related to the father. Okay, so now krove ha'aim, because again, we can also go from here upwards, right? From the son, then we can go up in his uncle and his, and then we get grandfathers, etc. So we've got this little relationship chart going. How about relationships through the mother? What about those? Nolan, where would you know that from? Amar Kra, the pasuk says, avos trei zimni. The pasuk that talks about the fathers and the sons says the word fathers 2 times, and so therefore we have this rule of called im'eno inyan, and we're going to use that rule. Im'eno inyan is when the Torah seems to repeat itself unnecessarily, and we never have the Torah repeat itself unnecessarily. So whenever the Torah says the same thing a second time, we are actually going to interpret it often as something that is not, or opposite, or separated from the original concept. So, in this circumstance, im'eno inyan lekruve ha'av, if it's not going to include the relatives of the father, to nehu inyan lekruve ha'aim, then let's apply it to the relatives of the mother. Okay, so ashkechan lechova. So in all of these cases, the pasuk says that this testimony should not cause one of your relatives to die. So then that means that we shouldn't testify negatively against them. Lizchus minolan, how do you know you're also not allowed to give testimony in favor of them, in support of them? So Amar Kra, the pasuk says, Yumosu trei zimni, it says the word again, yumosu, that they will die twice. Again, it's another application of the old im'eno inyan principle. Im'eno inyan lechova, if you cannot apply the principles 2 times to the same obligation, right, to cause them to be guilty. So Taneo inyan lizchus, then let's say that also testimony about it being in favor of that person also is not allowed. So bedini nefashos. So all of these cases in the pasuk talks about lo yamusu, you shouldn't die. Bedini mamonos minolan. How do I know these rules also apply to financial cases? So, Amar Kra, the pasuk says, a different pasuk, unrelated to the pasuk we've been quoting before. This is just in general. Mishpat echad yihya lachem. This is a application we use many times. That generally speaking, unless otherwise specified, the halacha is going to be the same, whether it's going to be a financial case or a case of what do you call it, of capital cases, right? We're going to keep those the same. Mishpat hashav lachem, keep the rules the same. So the rules of witnesses, who can be a witness, is going to be the same. Amar Rav Achi, Abba, lo yo'id lihu ubino v'chasno. Afani lo a'id lo ani ubini v'chasni. Okay, so Rav says, my father's brother cannot testify about me, right? Which we've got. My father's brother, we understand, right? My uncle. Him, his son, and his son-in-law. That was our Mishnah said that, right? Also, I can't testify about him. The relationship goes both ways. Both ways. Me, ani, uvni, v'chasni. Myself, my son, and my son-in-law. Now, that's a little bit of a new twist to this.
Why would you have to say son-in-law? Oh, I guess, that would actually make sense. Because the son-in-law wouldn't be automatic.
We're gonna get into the son-in-law.
No, but it would make sense. I thought
this is me in the case, right? This is me. I'm the son. I can't testify about my uncle.
Right.
Now he throws in, I can't testify about my uncle, his son, and his son-in-law, right? I'm gonna have, let's make this much easier here. We're gonna make this the relationship here, okay? The son, right? This is gonna be, I'm gonna put this as me, right? Me. My uncle, his son, that's my cousin, okay? And he has a son-in-law also. That means he has a daughter, right, who he's married to. That's son-in-law, S-I-L. Okay, so that makes sense, right? That's the daughter. Him and his son-in-law can't testify about any of those relationships. Then he adds another twist. He says, not only is that true about me, but also about my son and my son-in-law.
Right.
Okay, so now, in the Mishnah, we had discussed, so v'amai, why should these relationships, these sons and sons-in-law, be prohibited to testify? And I'm going to go slowly through this page a little bit just to be able to make sure, because if I mess up this explanation, it's going to be one of those Daf Yud Gimel situations where I have to kind of go over it again. So we'll go through it nice and clearly, right?
And we'll forgive you this time.
Okay, so I won't do it. I'm going to go nice and slowly this time. V'amai, havali shlishi barishon. What we've got is a third level relationship testifying against somebody who is a primary relationship. So that means what we have here is, this is our primary relationship, because these cousins are not really related in any sort of a way other than through the brothers, the fathers who are brothers. So this is the primary relationship in this tree. The fathers are my primary relationship. My relationship to this father's relationship, that's relationship number one. Step down, that makes me a 2, right? Because I'm secondary related to my uncle. And my son is a level 3. So that means that these guys are going to be 1s, right, to each other. This guy's going to be a 2, and these guys are going to be level 3. Okay? That means, according to what Rav Acha just said, is a 3 can't testify against a 1. Okay? Now, that sounds like not something our Mishnah said, because our Mishnah only had cousins not testifying about each other. So he says, Va'anan, we have in our Mishnah, Sheni b'Sheni Tanan. So our Mishnah had cousins not being able to testify.
2s and 2s.
This 2s and 2s, right? Mm-hmm. We never discussed extra sons to the uncles. We said I can't testify about my uncle or his sons and relatives, but it never involved my sons not testifying about my uncle.
Great uncle, right?
It's against his great uncle, yes, and actually it's his cousin once removed.
Right.
Right? If you're going to use English words. Although the English terms don't make it any clearer to me. I have to draw it on the board. Okay? So that's it. He can't testify about his cousin according to this.
So this would be second cousin once removed. 3 and 2 would be second.
Second cousins is his son. Second cousins is his son. This is first cousins. These are first cousins.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
This is first cousin once removed, right?
Right.
Okay. I looked it all up. Okay, so now.
I have this and I found it.
Okay, good. So Sheni, so he says Sheni b'Sheni Tanan, Sheni barishon Tanan. We have in our Mishnah cases where cousins can't testify about each other. We have situations in our relationships where the son can't testify about his uncle. That we've got Shlishi barishon lo Tanan. But we do not have any cases in the Mishnah where the great uncle can't be testified against. That we don't have. So therefore, the Gemara wants to know, where does he get this from? So, my chosno dikatani b'masnisen. So the answer is, no, we do have a case. When we say, right, that I can't testify, right, that I can't testify about my uncle, so it says I can't testify about my uncle, his sons, and his sons-in-law. So chason beno. So he says. So my chosno diktani b'masnisen. When the Mishnah uses the word son-in-law, I put him here. this is the son-in-law here. But that's not true. It's B'masis is Chasan Bino. It's his son's son-in-law. Really, they're supposing that this is the son-in-law here. He's down here. He's not over here. Not this son-in-law. This one instead. Now that makes it interesting because now
that automatically include the son as well.
He's a 3.
Right.
Is it about the Russian and the
Why did we do this? So hang on, because we're going to see why. So we're adding an extra level because, after all, if you just told me son and son-in-law, it's really the same level. Why would I have to be able to mention son and son-in-law? So the answer is Velesni ben Beno. Well, if that's the chiddush is that we're including grandsons, not just sons, so then why doesn't the Mishnah say sons and grandsons of these people I can't testify about? So the answer is Milsa Agav Urchei Kamashwan. The Mishnah is throwing out an extra teaching, and that is Debal Ishto, that husbands and wives are equivalent. Like we said when we were discussing the Mishnah originally, husbands and wives are the same level. So therefore, this son-in-law is the same level as a son. We would otherwise might have thought that it's his daughter, and now the son is an extra step. Not so. The son-in-law is a direct relationship to the father-in-law. That's one step. That's what the Mishnah is telling me. And therefore, by saying son and son-in-law, it must be down an extra step. Now it becomes very interesting. This is now telling us not only can a 3 not testify about a 1, but now if I can't testify about my uncle, his son, and his son-in-law is the next generation, that even means that we're including in our Mishnah a 3 and a 2. It's not just a 3 against a 1, because the son-in-law is now a 3rd-level generation, to me being a 2nd-level generation.
No, but why would you assume 3 and 2 would follow the same?
Because our Mishnah says that I can't testify about my uncle. That's a 2 to 1. His son, that's a 2 to 2. Or his son-in-law, that's a 2 to a 3.
But this is farther apart than this, right? This is considered once removed.
This is the one level. This is the level 1 relationship.
Right.
This is the level 2 relationship. This is the level 3 relationship.
Right.
The Mishnah says, can't testify about my uncle. That's the level 1 relationship.
Right.
The son, which is the level 2 relationship, or the son-in-law, that's the level 3 relationship.
Right.
Okay, so therefore, the Mishnah is literally saying now the 3 can't testify about a 2, which is a much more distant relationship than we had thought the Mishnah was talking about.
Okay.
So what do you
I thought it was in relation to, I thought it was in relation to from the uncle. The uncle can't.
No, because it's me, right? The
that's
Mishnah
what I
says,
think.
I can't testify about my uncle,
Right.
his son, and his son-in-law. So it's me to my uncle, me to his son, and me to his son-in-law.
So it doesn't include these. There's the 3 and the 3 is the question.
That we didn't even include 3 to 3. That for sure we agree. 3 to 3 is we're not going to try. We're not going to try 3 to 3. But 3 to 2 seems to be included in our Mishnah. We were astonished before about the 3 to 1s. Now we're even including 3 to 2s.
So in Anglo terms,
Yes.
talking about any first cousin.
First cousin once removed now.
First cousin once removed.
Correct.
As long as the first.
That means you have first cousin twice removed. You could.
What's that?
That means if his son, right?
Which would
The way you remove your cousins, and I've tried, but the way you can remove your cousins is basically a generation down. If your cousin has a baby, that becomes once removed. So if your cousin has a grandson, that's your cousin twice removed. Right? That's how you remove cousins.
So
if you're
it's
trying.
saying level 3,
Yes.
whether it's second cousin removed or whatever,
Yep.
or son-in-law, right? It's the
Yep.
same level.
That's correct. This
Level 2.
son and son-in-law is going to be like this son-in-law is a level 3
Yeah.
because he's the son. He's
Yeah, I
married
know.
to the daughter of his son.
What's the equivalence between these 3 and that 3?
What's the equivalence?
Yeah, those are just
These are
cousins.
second cousins.
That's good. These are now second cousins. Correct. These are
Yeah,
second cousins.
second cousins,
These
yeah.
are second cousins. Correct. Okay. Now, Velahaditani. Now, if that's the case, how are you going to understand which we learned in a brisa? Rabbi Chia says Shmona Avos. There are 8 main categories of people who you can't testify against. Now we're going to question that because our Mishnah actually lists 9 and perhaps 10. We're going to discuss that later on. Shehein Esrim V'Arba'a, which come out to be 24. How do they come out to be 24? Because we're going to include them, the 8 themselves,
How can you
their sons, that makes 16, their sons-in-law, which makes 24. Now, if you're going to make the next generation down, so then honey, tlos, and vatartin, you're up to 32. Because you've got now the 8 original ones, their 8 sons, their 8 sons-in-law, and now their 8 grandsons-in-law. Rashi points out you could also make it up to 40 if you included the 8 grandsons, but the Mishnah we didn't want to go overboard with the question. This brisa seems to not hold that the grandchildren should also be included in this list. Ella, so forget that. We don't like this answer. We don't want to put this extra grandson level in. Forget that list, because that would contradict this Mishnah of Rabbi Chia. Ella liolam chasno mamish. We're going to go back to this son-in-law. This is the son-in-law we're talking about. Okay, well, the problem that we're looking at is this son-in-law, we didn't like that because this son-in-law was only a secondary level, and according to Rav, he's including third levels. So how is a 3 to 1? Where do we see in our Mishnah a 3 to a 1? The answer is, so he says, it's chasno v'amai kari le chason bino, kevan de me alma ka'asi kedor acher dami. The answer is, your son-in-law, we had up until this point presumed bal ke'ishto, the husband and the wife are the same level. Not so. Your son-in-law comes from another family. Hence, your daughter is one level, and then the guy she marries is a separate level. So the son-in-law now becomes a 3. That's what we've done. That's why you have a 3 to a 1.
They'll still be your first cousin, though, right?
Still, well, it's now your first cousin-in-law. Okay? If you're counting at home, first cousin-in-law. Okay? So now, I just took my eye off the page. Hang on. Okay. Ihachi. Now we ask the next question. If that's true, Rav said the 3s to the 1s, that's where you can't testify. However, the way we're looking at this now, Havale Shlishi B'Sheni, we now have a 3 to a 2. Well, that V'Rav Achsher Shlishi B'Sheni. So does Rav is Rav saying that he's permitting a 3 to a 2? Is that correct? One second. He says, "Ihachi hava le shlishi b'sheni." Right, he's a third, and I'm the 2, and Rav Aksher Shlishi B'Sheni. Oh, Rav says that's what it is. Rav says a 3 to a 2 is permitted. Right, it's not a relate. According to what we just said, the Mishnah is saying the 3 to a 2 is prohibited. I confused myself. 3 to a 2 is prohibited because that's included in the Mishnah. But Rav said no, only 3 to a 1 is prohibited. 3 to a 2 is not related, and they're okay. So that's going to be a problem. Ella. Rav de Amar Rabbi Elazar. So rather, you're right. Must be the Mishnah doesn't go according to. We're going to abandon the Mishnah and say the Mishnah doesn't go according to Rav. But Rav is okay. We have Rav Tanu Palik. We make this comment that Rav can argue, but Rav is not going to have his own opinion. Rav is going to be holding like another opinion, another Tana from another brisa. That's what we're going to say. Must be like this. Rav de Amar Rabbi Elazar. Rav is holding like Rabbi Elazar. The Tanya is we're in a brisa. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Elazar says, Kishem she'achi abba lo ya'idli, just like my father's brother can't testify about me, hu ubeno v'chosno, him, his son and his son-in-law, kach ben achi abba lo ya'idli. So too, the son of my father's brother, my cousin, can't testify about me. Hu ubeno v'chosno, him, his son, and his son-in-law. Okay. Well, that's exactly what we said, right? His son, and his son-in-law can't testify. Those are all third-level relationships, right? So therefore, Vakasi Havale Shlishi B'Sheni, we're still back to the same problem. Rabbi Elazar holds 3 to a 2. So for Rav Achsher Shlishi B'Sheni, Rav says a 3 to a 2 is fine. So the answer is, okay, you're right. Rav Savar le Kavase Bechada Upaliga le Bechada. Rav is going to agree with part of what he says, but not with all of what he says. So you're right. It's a little bit like Rabbi Elazar, right? We abandoned our Mishnah's case. We decided the son-in-law is still going to be a 2, so our Mishnah is only going to tell us 2 to 2s, 2 to 1s. Rabbi Elazar is going to extend it and say even you can't testify 3s to 2s. And Rav is going to say 3s to 2s are okay, 3s to 1 is the limit. My time de Rav. What is Rav's rationale? Where does he get off on this? Where does it say this in anywhere? So the Amar Kra, the pasuk says, Lo yumasu avos al banim ubanim. He puts a comma of the pasuk in the place where the comma doesn't belong. right? The way the pasuk reads is the father should not die for the son, and the son should not die on the father. That's what we were learning. He says the father should not die on the sons, and the sons. Stop the statement right there. So what does that mean? That's l'rabos dor acher. He's saying the father should not die for the sons. So here's the father should not die for the sons, and the sons add another generation. That's how you read the pasuk. Properly and improperly, right? You read it in both ways to get all the drushos out of it. Rabbi Elazar, and Rabbi Elazar's version of the pasuk is albanim, he reads the words albanim to mean that whoever is prohibited to the fathers also goes to the sons. So therefore, if the father can't go to here, can't marry, can't testify about these, this son and his sons then have all the same prohibitions as well. And so therefore, that's where Rabbi Elazar is going to say, these two, the third generation, have the same prohibitions as the second generation, and therefore, just like a two can't testify against the two, the third generation can't testify about the two. That's Rabbi Elazar. Rav says, it's just these generations. We're going to add this generation, the sons, and then the sons on top of that can't testify about the fathers, but only about the fathers. That's how he learns it. So therefore, Rav says 3s to 1s. Rabbi Elazar says 3s to 2s. Our Mishnah just says 2s to 2s and 1s to 1s.
So for Rav, a
2s to 1s.
grandson can testify against
His cousin once removed, but he can't, but he cannot testify against his great uncle. Good. That wasn't so bad. Amar Rav Nachman. One more. Rav Nachman says, Achi chamosi lo ya'id li, right? My mother-in-law's brother. Right? My mother-in-law's brother. Me, wife, her mother, and she has a brother.
Right.
Okay? My mother-in-law's brother can't testify about me, and I can't testify about her. No problem, right? So, not only that one.
Right there.
Then he also says, Ben Achi Chamosi. Okay? The son of my father-in-law's brother. Okay? Another one. Me, my wife. Yes.
Yes.
I told you, I warned you for this Amud. Okay, if you said it's confusing, yes. But I'm trying to go. I'm going slowly and nicely for the sake of being able. Hopefully, we'll be able to get it. Okay. So, what was it? Was it
Father-in-law's brother.
right? Ben Achi Chamasi, his son. There you go. Good. All right. Good. Uncle Mike.
Uncle Mike.
Okay. His son. So now, I can't testify about him. He can't testify about me. Now, so he says, okay. So now, Ben Achos Chamosi lo yoidli, and also my mother-in-law's sister's son. I won't draw this one because we'll be able to get the idea of what's going on here. Can't testify about me. V'tana tuna. All of these cases are actually the opposite cases of things we already included in our Mishnah. That's the point he's making. These sound like new relationships, but they're not. They're the opposite of other relationships. Because Bal Achoso Ubal Achos Aviv, right? Say Bal Achoso, his sister's husband, right? This guy here, his sister's, right? So his sister's son's husband is me. So therefore, we had this case as my sister's son's husband, my sister's son-in-law, is exactly the same case as my mother-in-law's brother. Okay. So all that Rav Nachman's doing is showing you that the relationships go both ways. Nothing really complicated, too much to it, right? Bal achos aviv, right? So it says Bal achos aviv, his father's sister's husband, them, and his children, Ubal achos imo, and his mother's, right? His mother's sister's husband, them and their children and their sons-in-law. So basically, all of these cases, just right, my father's daughter's husband, right? My father's son-in-law. All of these cases are the exact same cases as things we've already listed in the Mishnah. Just we reverse them. Okay, so they're not so terrible. Okay, now. Phew. Amar Rav Ashi, ki havinan be'ula iboilan. When we were at Ula's yeshiva, or the house of Ula, either one, iboilan, he asked the following question of us: Achi chamav mahu. What about your father-in-law's brother? Ben achi chamav mahu. What about your father-in-law's brother's son? So ben achos chamav mahu. What about your father-in-law's brother's son? Okay, what is the halacha? Amar lon, so he said to us, Tanisua, these are just cases again in the Mishnah. Achiv, his brother, V'achi aviv, and his father's brother, V'achi imo, and his mother's brothers, Haim uvnehem v'chasnehem, the sons, the son-in-laws, etc. So again, it's these exact cases are just flips of the existing cases in the Mishnah. Rav Ikla, Lemizvan, and we're going to go to Chav Ches Amud Beis, Gevili. So one time, Rav went to go buy some parchment from the store. Okay, going shopping for some parchment. They met him in the store, and this is what happens. This is what life. You want to know what the life of a rabbi is? He goes to Walmart, and somebody meets him. Oh, Rabbi, I was going to call you and ask you a question, right? So he's off buying his parchment, and in the store they catch him. He's going to ask him a question. Ask a question. So Mao Sheyayid Odom Be'eshes Churgo. So what about your stepson, right? The wife of your stepson. Can you testify about that one? We said in the Mishnah that only the stepson, right, was the one that wasn't his sons and his son-in-laws. What about the wife of the son-in-law? Well, the wife of the stepson. Sorry, the wife of the stepson. So Besura Omri Balk Ishto. So in Surah they said a husband's like the wife. Bepumpadisa Omri Isha Kibala. The husband is like the wife is like the husband. Same thing. Bottom line is that the son-in-law, even though when it comes to the stepson, even though there's no next level relationships after him, his spouse is the same as him. So therefore, that is definitely someone you can't justify against.
You're like a grandfather to him because let's just say you got divorced and you remarried.
You're like his fill-in father. That's right. And but his children are not your grandchildren.
It's interesting because in Yarshaning, it doesn't. There is a difference between the mother's side and the father's side.
There is, correct.
Yeah.
And that's why we said in our Mishnah that it seems like there used to be a circumstance, they were used to look at it that way, and then they decided when it comes to testimony, it's not just about whether you're going to be able to inherit the person, it's actual relationships.
Right.
Damar Rav Huna Amar Rav. We switch it to Rav Huna said in the name of Rav. Is it Rav Nachman? Yeah. I know it's in parentheses. Minayin sha'isha kebala. How do I know that a woman is the exact same level of relationship as her husband? The pasuk says, "Ervas achi avicha lo segaleh." You cannot reveal when you cannot have relations with a woman who's married to your father's brother. Right, your aunt. That's somebody you cannot have relations with. So, el ishto lo sikrov dodas chahi. You cannot be close to her. She is your aunt. Well, she's not your aunt, right? She married your uncle. That's not the same thing, is it? Valo eishas dodohi. She's your uncle's wife, right? Miklal de isha kabbalah. The answer is no. Your uncle's wife is your aunt. Same difference. There's no difference between your uncle's wife and your father's sister, who's actually your aunt. Same halacha, and that's where we learn that from. Okay, now, ubal imo. Your mother's husband, second husband, right? Hu ubeno, him, and his son, vichosno, and son-in-law. So, 1 second. Beno, his son, hainu achiv, that's your brother, right? Isn't that your brother, your father's son? So the answer, Rabbi Yirmiyah, lo nitzurcha elel achi ha'ach. It's your brother's brother. What does that mean? Brady Bunch time, right again, right? The Brady Bunch. We had the mother had a son from the first marriage. The father has a son from his first marriage. They get married together. The brothers are not related to each other at all. They can testify about each other. Now, the two of them have a kid. Now that they have a kid, now the two brothers from the first marriages cannot testify about each other because they now share a brother-brother. They now share a brother. So now, since it's my brother's brother, I can't testify about him. Does that make sense? Right? Before, right? There's a diagram, of course, right? Yes. The mother, the father.
You're telling me until they have kids.
Right? They each had a son, right? They each had a son, right? Then they married each other. These guys are not related.
Right.
So right?
They can testify against each other.
But now they have a son. He's half brothers with him, and he's half brothers with him. As a result, these two people are now related because they are now my brother's brother. So before they could testify about each other, now that my mother and father got married together and had a kid, now they can't.
Wouldn't that be a child and vice issue with other child?
Why?
Fighting against each other? Married, so it could.
Technically speaking, if one's a son, and we had this case, right? If one's a son and one's a daughter, they can marry each other also.
So wait, can I ask a question? A weird question? I would assume if they didn't have a kid and these two got divorced,
Right?
he would be able to still testify against him at that point.
Yes,
and he'd be able
correct.
to- but since they have a son through that son,
That's also
now
true.
He can't,
That
they
is-
can't testify against each other.
Beautiful, 100%. That son now creates a bond of a relationship in a different way, right? Because it's my brother's mother now that I can't testify against, whereas before, this lady's not related to me,
And
really.
the son dies, would it be the same thing?
No.
Oh.
Then if the son dies, now we're not related again. All the Mishnah
Okay,
says is,
right.
all depends on what our current relationships are,
Right.
right? Okay. So,
Why? Even if the son dies, they're still related.
not anymore.
Why?
If this son dies,
Oh, no.
Right?
I'm saying one of the other.
one or the other, that's true, right?
yeah.
But if this one
Yeah,
dies,
okay, fine.
right, he's important in the relationship between these two brothers, right? Okay. Rav Chisda, ach sher ba'achi ha'ach. Rav Chisda said the brother's brother is still kosher to testify against each other.
Why is that?
Oh, good question. Amruleh, they said to him, Lo shmiya lachod Rabbi Yirmiyah. So he said, didn't you hear what Rabbi Yirmiyah said? He said it wasn't so. Amrulu, Lo shmiya li. He says, no, I didn't hear of it. Klomar, which is to say, Lo sphirali. I don't hold of that. He says, ultimately, they're still not related. Ihachi hainu achiv. So then if that's the case, then how are you understanding the Mishnah's case? The Mishnah says that you can't testify about your parent's child. That is your brother then. If you're going to say it's your non-brother, where you're married from the second marriage, if that's not going to be the case, then what is the case? So the answer is Tana achiv mina av, Katani achiv mina aim. He says, you're right, it is. It's repetitive. The Mishnah is repeating the case of the parent's child in order to tell me that it applies to the son of my mother and the son of my father, a half sibling from either side. Because I might have thought that it only applies to my half brother from my father's side because of inheritance.
Right.
Therefore, it's telling me that it applies both to the father's side and the mother's side.
Sounds like inheritance is the only law specifically that's separate, that is different. Like it even, am I right?
Well,
like in terms of marriage.
Depends on where you're looking
No,
from. Otherwise, this is different.
No. In terms of marriage and in terms of marriage and in terms of testifying,
Yes, these are closely related.
they go together. It
Yes.
seems to work. What they consider.
I say that
trading works the same
Yavamos
way.
and things does definitely right. Where you can have Yibum, where those relationships are, yes.
Right.
That is. Amar Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda says, Avi Chasan, the father-in-law, the Avi Kala, and the mother-in-law of a couple, right? Couple get married, the in-laws, right? The parents-in-laws of each other. They're Me'idin Zeb al Zeh. They can testify about each other. You might say, oh, what are you talking about? It's my son-in-law's father-in-law, so I can't testify about him. No, not related. Why? They are not related to each other, except they're like a lid fitting on a barrel, meaning they just happen to complement each other, but they're not like perfect fits.
How about when they have a grandchild? But wait, how about when they have a grand?
Two sets of parents.
Two sets of parents.
But what happens when they have a grandchild?
Then
That would be a connection at that point.
I don't think it still is a connection, because remember, that becomes a third generation. We have to go back up and down, right? That would be like a 2 to a 2.
But a 3-2,
3-2.
3-2 works.
I have to take a look. The answer is
It should work.
seems like not. We're gonna have to look. Well, I'll think about it, but I hear where you're coming from. I have to do the diagram to figure it out. But the answer is no, it does not. They're going to just decide that these are not really relationships. Amar Rabba Bar Chana. Rabba Bar Chana says, "Meid Adam liishto arusa." A person can testify about his wife that he's only had erusin from, right? Remember the two steps of marriage, the erusin, they haven't moved in together yet. They just did well, we're calling it the engagement, right? A little bit more of the engagement. They're an arusa, can still testify. Amar Ravina. Ravina says, "Lo amran el lafuki mina." That's only to testify against her. About la yulila, but to testify in her favor, lo mahiman. We're not going to believe him. Why? Because anything she gets, he's going to be married and he gets. So that's a great scheme, right? Help her testify on her behalf to get $1 million, and then he marries, and then he gets the $1 million. Cannot work that way. Veloi, but it is not correct. Lo shna lafuki, velo shna luye, lo mihiman. We're not going to believe him either way. We're not going to. We change it. We're going to say nope. The halacha is we're not going to allow it.
Why is the one Rabbi says if you're engaged with her, you know
The question was really a matter of whether we are observing that those relationships are creating conflicts or not. That's our issue. So my datach,
Consider too close, Arusa and
the Arusa and her husband?
Yeah.
We're saying they're too close, yes.
Yeah.
Now we're saying they're too close. My dad take, what were you thinking? Reb Chia Barami, like Reb Chia Barami says, Mishmei De'ula, Ishto Arusa. Why? Because originally we said, the halacha is that a woman who he's done erusin with, lo onain, he doesn't have an onain status. If she dies, he doesn't go into the mourning status of the obligation to bury her. V'lo matami love, he's a kohen, he can't become tameh for her. V'chein, he lo onenes. Also, she doesn't become an onenes for him, v'lo matam alo, and she doesn't become impure in order to be able to, which would prohibit her from bringing a korban, for example, going to Yerushalayim, eating certain things, certain kodshim for his behalf. Mesa, if she dies, Eino Yorsha, he doesn't inherit her. Meshu, if he dies, Govek Ksubasa, then she does collect her ksuba, although that's not obligatory. If he in fact gave her the ksuba at this point, then she would be able to collect it. But that implies that she's not really related. So the halacha seems to show they're not really related. That was the original thought. So the answer is, Hasam b'she'ero tola rachmana, akasi lo she'ero. The answer is, sort of like as Brian was saying, the ground rules are different for each section of halacha. That is as regards to consider them to be one partnership. They're bonded together in marriage, and they're not. Hacha mishum ikruve datahu. This is about whether you're in love with each other, right? Whether you have a close relationship, whether one person will be willing to lie for the other person, right? That's that. V'ha ikruve data legaba. This he would do. So therefore, we're not going to accept it. Okay. Next one is chorgo levado. The Mishnah says just the stepson. So now, Tan Rabbanan, our rabbis learned Chorgo Levado. We learned in a brisa just the stepson, meaning not his son or son-in-law. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Rabbi Yossi says Giso. Rabbi Yossi then throws in the brother-in-law, which we said the specific brother-in-law, his wife's sister's husband. Okay, that also. Now, what does he mean by that? Not quite sure. Sounds like what he's saying is, either he's saying not the stepson, all of his relatives also are invalid to testify, but the brother-in-law, his son and son-in-law are not invalid to testify, or he's adding it and saying also this one. So, Vitanya Idach, we have another brisa. This brisa says, Giso Levado, only the brother-in-law. He's the one who has no son and son-in-law that's invalid. Rabbi Yehuda says, Chorgo, no, the stepson. So my kamar, how are we going to figure all of this out? We've got our Mishnah, we've got the two brises. How do we figure it all out? So ilema hachi kamar. This is maybe what the first brisa means to say. Chorgo levado. Only the stepson, only he's unable to testify, but his son or son-in-law is able to testify. Vehu hadin legiso, and then the Tanakama means to say that's also the case when it comes to the brother-in-law. Vas Rabbi Yossi lemeimar, and then Rabbi Yossi's coming along and he's saying giso levado vehu hadin lechorgo, that it's the brother-in-law, which is also the halacha by the stepson. Now, if you were following that, so then that sounds like they're saying essentially the same thing, right? One is saying the stepson and the stepson and the brother-in-law. The other one is saying the brother-in-law and the stepson. Ela masnisen de katani giso hu beno v'chosno money. But the problem would be that if that's how you're going to interpret it, basically they're adding on to each other to eventually say the same thing. The Mishnah doesn't agree with this point of view, because the Mishnah says only the giso hu beno v'chosno, the brother-in-law, his son and his son-in-laws are invalid. So money. So whose opinion would that be? Because according to both of Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi, they said that the stepson wasn't included. The brother-in-law. Sorry, the brother-in-law was not included in that. So it would be low Rabbi Yehuda, low Rabbi Yossi. So then our Mishnah wouldn't follow Rabbi Yossi or Rabbi Yehuda. Ve'ela hachi kamar. So rather, this is how we're going to explain the brises. Chorgo levado. The first Tanakam is saying that the stepson, not his sons or son-in-laws, aval giso, but the brother-in-law, hu beno v'chosno, which sounds like our Mishnah, right? Only the stepson doesn't include the other relatives, but the brother-in-law, we do include his son and his son-in-law. V'asa Rabbi Yossi l'meimer, Rabbi Yossi disagrees with our Mishnah, and he says giso levado, that it's only that the brother-in-law, not his son and son-in-law. Aval chorgo hu beno v'chosno, but the stepson, it is his son and his son-in-law. Okay, ve'ella. So now the problem is like this: Haditani Reb Chia. Let's go back to the brisa we quoted last page about Reb Chia. Shmona avos shein esrei v'arba. Remember, he had 8 main categories. Well, if you start counting it out, there are 10 in our Mishnah. If you count the brother-in-law and if you count the stepson, there are 10. So, Keman. So who's it going to go like? Lo Rabbi Yossi. It's not going to be like Rabbi Yossi because he's going to remove one of them, but he's going to have 9 left. V'lo Rabbi Yehuda is going to remove the stepson, but he's still going to have 9 left. So either way, whether you're removing the brother-in-law or you're removing the stepson, if you're removing one but not the other, you still are at 9 instead of 8. Ella hachikamer. So rather, we're going to interpret it like this. Last chance. Chorgo livado. That when it comes to the stepson, this is the opinion of our Mishnah, and this is going to be Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. The stepson livado. It's not his son, not his son-in-law. Aval giso, but the brother-in-law, hu v'no v'chosno. We are going to include him in the list of the relatives that are prohibited, also the son and the son-in-law. V'asar Rabbi Yossi lemeimar, and Rabbi Yossi comes along and he says, I'm going to add on to that. Giso levado, the brother-in-law also is by himself. V'kol shekain chorgo, also the stepson. So he's going to exclude both the brother-in-law and the stepson, bringing the total down to 8. Therefore, Masnisin Rabbi Yehuda, the Mishnah, is going to follow Rabbi Yehuda's point of view, and the Brisa, Rabbi Chia's Brisa, is going to follow Rabbi Yossi's point of view. Very nice. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. Rabbi Yehuda says his name is Shmuel. Halacha k Rabbi Yossi. The halacha is like Rabbi Yossi. Hahi masnisa dehavi chasimi Allah tre gisi. There was once a contract, a matnasa, a contract for a gift that had 2 brother-in-laws signed on it. Okay, so now comes the question: can they be 2 witnesses together, 2 brother-in-laws? Savar Rav Yosef lachshura. So Rav Yosef thought that should be okay. Da'amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, because Rav Yehuda said in Shmuel halacha ka Rabbi Yossi, that the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi. So Amar le'Abaye, Abaye says, Mimai de Rabbi Yossi de Masnisin de Machshir begiso. How do you know it's Rabbi Yossi in our Mishnah who seems to imply, because Rabbi Yossi in our Mishnah said, not all of these relatives. It's the original Rabbi Akiva version, that it was only the relative from the father's side. That was that Rabbi Yossi. And he thought maybe that means the brother-in-laws are really okay to testify. Dilma Rabbi Yossi de Brisa. It's Rabbi Yossi of the Brisa. Remember, Rabbi Yossi of the Brisa says that the brother-in-laws can't testify about each other, but the sons of the brother-in-laws can. But brother-in-laws themselves, they can't be on a contract together. De Paso Begiso, he says that 2 brother-in-laws, right, are not able to be on a contract together. Lo cycle daitach, don't think that way. Why? De Amar Shmuel, Shmuel says, Kigon Ana Upinchas, De Havinon Achi Vegisi. So what happens is that Shmuel said, look at me and my brother Pinchas. Shmuel and Pinchas were both brothers and brothers-in-law. How do you become a brother and a brother-in-law? You marry 2 sisters. Right? Person, 2 brothers marry 2 sisters.
I think they don't let do that.
2 brothers can marry 2 sisters, right? 2 brothers can marry 2 sisters, right? One brother marries 1 sister, the other brother marries his sister-in-law's sister, right? Could do that.
Yep.
Okay? So now, he says, like us. So now, they thought that he meant that since we are brothers and brother-in-laws, we can't testify about each other. Why? Mainly because of the brothers.
Right.
The brother-in-law is not really the issue. About Gisei Dialma Shapir dummy, but if they were just brother-in-laws, it would be permissible. So no, that's not what he was saying. V'dilma kagon ano pincha mishum de Gisa. What he was saying, like me and my brother Pinchas, would be invalid if all we were are brother-in-laws. So really, Rabbi Yosef never validated it. And so therefore this is Tzakamer. Amar le zilkanya be'ede mesira. So he told him, so he's like, okay, I guess Shmuel's right. So he told the guy who was holding this contract, you're not going to be able to collect with these witnesses. These witnesses are invalid. So you know what you need to do? We have the old, we need to find the witnesses who saw the contract handed over. Right? Remember that the witnesses signed on the document, those are only secondary to the issue. If we saw the witnesses sign, if we saw the contract actually being handed over, those witnesses can still help you get your case proven. So that's what he told them.
If the witnesses disappear to another country and you can't find
Then
them,
you're going to be stuck, yeah. But we're going to presume people were sort of relatively in the same places.
I think I remember you answering this, and I think I know the answer. I just want to confirm. If there's witnesses, let's say 2 brother-in-laws make a testify, they testify, then there's a divorce. Does that testimony become invalid? No, it becomes valid because at the time.
That's right.
Right. I just want to make sure. So it doesn't become, okay, fine.
So, it's Rabbi Elazar who says the 80 Mesira is sufficient. But if you will recall, Rabbi Abba said about that, Moda Rabbi Elazar b'mezuyaf mitocho shu pasol. That's only if there were no witnesses on this contract. Then the witnesses of handing it over were valid, and that's fine. But if the witnesses on the contract were invalid witnesses, now they've ruined the contract. What you've essentially is I'm testifying that you're handing over a piece of paper that's worth nothing. So that's great, testify all you want, but the contract is still valueless. So therefore, since you've got two guys who are brother-in-laws on this contract, you've ruined the contract.
Right.
And now, even if you find the guys who witnessed the transfer, it's not going to help you. So Amar Leh, so he told the poor guy, Zil lo shavki li dosvini lach. I guess you got to go. There's no, I can't help you in the case. This contract is not going to help you. Rabbi Yehuda Amar. Now, what Rabbi Yehuda says. What was Rabbi Yehuda saying? Rabbi Yehuda says that even if his daughter dies, if he has grandchildren from his daughter, then the son-in-law remains prohibited for him to testify against. Because the connection is through the children, correct? Right. Okay. Amar Rav Tanchum, Amar Rav Tabla, Amar Rav Bruna, Amar Rav. Halacha Rabbi Yehuda. The halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda. Rav Amar Rav Nachman, Ein halacha Rabbi Yehuda, and Rava says in the name of Rav Nachman, the halacha is not like Rabbi Yehuda.
Would that bring up a contradiction?
That is exactly that. We call that an argument. Right? They are disagreeing with each other. V'chein Amar Rabba Bar Rachana. Rabbi Rachana says, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Ein halacha Rabbi Yehuda. The halacha is not like Rabbi Yehuda. Eka demasni lo leha. Some people teach it as follows: De Rabbi Bar Rachana aha as Zu Dorish Rabbi Yossi Aglili. This is how Rabbi Yossi Aglili made the following teaching. And he said like this: Ubasa kohanim halavim ve'ashofet asher yeh bayamim haim. You should take your case to the kohanim, to the levim, to the judges that are going to be in your day. V'chitala dascha she'adam holech etzel shofet shelo hayah bayamav. How are you supposed to explain that pasuk? What, you thought that you were going to take it to the judge that isn't alive when you're in court? I mean, why would you do that? Ella. Rather, it means like this. Ela zeshaya korov v'nisrachek. Rather, it refers to a judge who was related to you and now is not. So therefore, since they were related and now they are not, they are perfectly fine to be valid. Amar Rabbi Bar Chana. On this point, Rabbi Bar Chana says, Rabbi Yochanan, halacha Rabbi Yossi haglili. The halacha is like Rabbi Yossi haglili. That this statement of Rabbi Yossi Aglili, that if he was related and now they're not, they are separated. B'nei Chamua, and therefore this shows you the halacha is not like Rabbi Yehuda, right. Because even though they are still sort of related by the grandchildren, right. Nevertheless, once they are not, they're separated. That is, they're not doesn't make a difference. Correct. So, Chamua Demar Ukva, the father-in-law, or the Bnei Chamua, the children of the father-in-law of Mar Ukva, were in Chav Tesam Aleph, Krovim v'nisrachaku havu. So they were related, right? And then they became separated. How so? Because Mar Ukva's wife died, and so then he was no longer related to his father-in-law, right? So he was no longer related to his brother-in-laws, right? His father-in-law's children. Also the Kamei Ladina, so they came to him for a court case. Amar lahu pasilna lechu ladina. He said, I'm going to recuse myself. I cannot judge your court case. Amrule, they said to him, Mai dasech. Rabbi Yehuda, what are you trying to say? Like Rabbi Yehuda, are you following Rabbi Yehuda's point of view? That we're still anon maisinon igrasa mimarava dena lach Rabbi Yehuda. We brought a letter. I'll get you a letter of psak halacha from Eretz Yisrael that shows you the halacha is not like Rabbi Yehuda. We're no longer related. We're done. Amar lahu, he said to them, Atu bekava dekira idav kana bechu delo kamina pasilna lechu ledina. He says, what are you thinking? You're thinking that the issue is that we are still. I'm worried that we're still related, and that's the concern, and that because we're still like a close relationship, and that's why I'm recusing myself. No, that's not why. Ela mishum delot saisisu dina. We're just so familiar with each other. You're not going to listen to whatever I have to say. So I'm going to rule the court case. You're not going to listen to me. So therefore, since I know that that's not going to work, I'm recusing myself from the court case.
It wasn't the
It wasn't a halachic thing, exactly. That's correct. Okay, next, ohev. Somebody who he's loved, which is shoshbina, which is somebody who's involved in helping the person get his wedding ready. V'kama, how much is that? Amar Rav Abba, Amar Yirmiyah, Amar Rav, Kol Shivas Yemei HaMishta, during the whole Sheva Brachos. Right, the guy who's setting up your Sheva Brachos for you can't testify him during the Sheva Brachos. V'Rabbana Mishmei de Rav Amar Afilu Miyom Rishon Ve'elach. Just the first day, right? You can testify after the first day.
Testify against you if he's not related to you or in any way?
You're not related, right? But we're good close friends, so I might lie for him. Right? So therefore, that is the concern. Hasone,
No, it's just funny that that's the definition of a chaver.
Yeah.
Is that he's setting up your Sheva brachas.
That's
what
right.
About,
Pretty
what about
close.
like a lifelong friend? Right.
Well, then he'd set up your Sheva Brachos, wouldn't he?
I guess it's the guy. I guess so.
That's who you'd pick, right? Hasone,
But it's only during that time.
just during that time. That's exactly the point, right? It's a very close,
Right, it's
very
about
close,
like, it's whether
the
it's all
closest
Sheva
of the
brachas
closest moments,
Right.
right? That's all it is.
Sheva brachas are one day because you want to see. I'm assuming it's because you want to see the Sheva bracha go through. I spent
right,
all this
it's not-
time. I don't want him to go to prison. Like,
Hasone kol shelo-
Back afterwards.
Right, so somebody says anybody who doesn't talk to for 3 days because he doesn't like him. That was the case, the example of the sone. So Tana Rabbanan, v'hu lo oyev lo yeidenu. So this is by the case of right. This is the person who kills somebody negligently. Right? So if it turns out that we want to be able to make sure that it's true negligence. And so therefore, if a person has some sort of ill feelings to somebody in his heart, so then it could be that subconsciously it wasn't so negligent. So therefore, we have to be able to say, "V'hu lo oyev lo," he wasn't he didn't hate him. But now that we're using that definition, we can use it also to apply in this circumstance as well. Right? So if he's not his oyev under that definition, so then ye'idenu, he can testify. V'lo mevakesh ra'aso yedinenu. And if he doesn't want to seek evil for him, so then he can be his dayan, he can judge him. So ashkechan sone. So now that is sort of a source in the Torah for this case of a sone. Ohev minalan. So where do we have this? Where do we have a pasuk in the Torah that says that he likes the person? So Kari Be Hachi. He learned the following pasuk: V'hu lo oyev lo. Right? He's not somebody who is his enemy. V'lo ohev lo, and he's not also his close friend. Right, that's what we're going to put on. He's not particularly. Then yeidenu, then he can testify for him. V'lo mevakesh ra'aso. Now he isn't looking for his evil. V'lo tovaso, not the opposite. He's not looking for his particular good. Then yedinenu, then he can judge him. Midei ohev ksiv. So he says, but one second, that the pasuk says, right. Doesn't talk about any of those side parts, right? We only wrote the negative ones. It's not his enemy. You just threw all those opposites in. That was your own judgment there. Ella svarahu. Rather, it's not really a pasuk, it's a logical deduction. Oyev my taima. What is the reason why somebody who you hate, you can't testify? Mishum demerach kodase, because you are of opinion to stay away from him. Oyev nami mikarva date. So also somebody who you appreciate, you love, you're close to him. V'rabbanan hai lo oyev lo v'lo mevakesh raso my darshpe. The rabbanan who disagree, they say, no, you can't testify about somebody who you love or you hate. Remember, they said in the Mishnah it doesn't matter. So how are they doresh? Chad l'dayan. So the answer is one is for the judge, because you're right, you can testify, but they don't say you can judge. You can't judge somebody you don't like, and you can't judge somebody who is your friend. And the other one, idach, and the other time it says it is kidetanya we're in a brisa. Amar Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda. V'hu lo yevlo, he's not his enemy. V'lo mevakesh rason, he's not seeking his evil. Mikan l'shnei talmidei chachamim sheson in zezeh she'ein yoshvin badin ke'echad. They cannot be on the same court together. Right? They cannot be on the same court together. They have to stay separate on the separate courts. Do we want to stop here? Or
well, it's 9:30.
yeah, let's stop
You
here.
have to do more. We have to start tomorrow.
We will stop here.